Okay, you've seen them everywhere, right? Adult coloring books. They're in bookstores, grocery checkout lines, probably on your friend's coffee table. They all promise the same thing: stress relief, a moment of zen, a little dose of mindfulness. But here's the real question we're digging into. Is this stuff actual art therapy, or is it just a really well-marketed fad? And this, right here, is the claim that built an entire industry. Manufacturers aren't just selling you pretty patterns on paper. No, they're selling an idea, a promise, that this simple act can literally lower your stress and make you more mindful. And you gotta admit, that's a pretty powerful sales pitch.
And there's a huge reason that pitch works so well. Get this. Almost 57% of university students report feeling overwhelming anxiety. Let that sink in for a second. That's more than half. So yeah, the search for something, anything that can provide effective, easy relief is more urgent than ever. People are desperate for something that actually helps.
So, that brings us to the million-dollar question. When you strip away all the marketing, the pretty packaging, and the personal anecdotes, what does the hard science say? Do these coloring books actually hold up when scientists put them under the microscope? To figure that out, we have to go inside the psychology lab. Because you can't just measure stress by asking someone, "Hey, you feeling less stressed now?" Science needs cold, hard, measurable data, especially for something as tricky and personal as stress. And researchers basically attack this from two angles. First, you've got the self-reports. These are surveys and questionnaires where you rate your own feelings. It's what you say is going on in your head. But then, and this is key, you've got the physiological data. This is what your body is actually doing, whether you notice it or not. We're talking heart rate, blood pressure, even the amount of sweat on your skin. It's the mind versus the body. Now here's a super important part of the whole setup. To test if something reduces stress, you've got to make sure your subjects are actually stressed to begin with. That makes sense, right? You can't measure a drop from zero. So they have a standardized way to get everyone's stress levels up to a similar measurable point. And how do they do it? With something called the Trier Social Stress Test. And trust me, this thing is notoriously effective. Picture this. You're given 2 minutes, just 2, to prep a speech for a fake job interview. Then you have to give that speech to a panel of people in lab coats who are just stone-faced judging you. If you pause or stumble, they just say, "Please continue." Yeah, it is designed to be a nightmare, and it absolutely works to spike your stress levels. Okay, so once everybody is good and stressed out, the real experiment can finally start. Researchers split people into groups, one gets to color, the other gets a boring control task, and then they measure what happens right after.
And the first results, based on what people said, were really clear. The group that spent 20 minutes coloring a mandala pattern, they reported a big drop in stress and a big jump in relaxation. And the poor control group, who had to read a dry textbook, nothing. No change at all. So based on feelings alone, coloring was a huge win.
And this wasn't a one-off. Another study found the exact same thing. After that awful stress test, the people who got to color reported feeling way less anxious than the people who just sat there. You can see it right on the chart. The people who colored felt a whole lot better. So if we only look at these self-reports, the surveys, the mood scales, the verdict seems pretty simple, right? Coloring works. It makes you feel less stressed, at least for a little while. But remember that other set of data we talked about? The body? This is where the story gets really interesting, because it turns out the mind was telling one story, and the body was telling a completely different one. The self-reports were glowing. People felt better. But what about those hard, objective numbers? Did their heart rates actually slow down? Did their blood pressure drop? Were their bodies getting the memo to calm down? The answer was a big, fat no. When the scientists looked at the physiological data, the effect completely vanished. There was no meaningful difference in heart rate, blood pressure, or skin conductance between the group that colored and the group that didn't. Physically, both groups were still just as stressed as they were before. And this is the fascinating twist at the heart of it all. Coloring changed people's perception of their stress. It changed their subjective feeling, but it did not change their actual physical stress response. The mind felt better, but the body was still running in high gear. Okay, so that raises another obvious question. Even if the benefit is just in your head, maybe it builds up over time, right? Like if you color a little bit every day, do you see some long-term improvement in your overall stress or anxiety? Well, they tested that too. One group was assigned to color for 20 minutes every single day for a week, and the results? Pretty conclusive. After a full week, there were no significant changes in their perceived stress, their anxiety symptoms, or their mindfulness levels. That little short-term mood boost just didn't translate into any lasting change.
So if it's not actually relaxing our bodies and it doesn't have any long-term benefits, then what is going on in those 20 minutes? What's the magic ingredient that makes people feel better? Well, it really comes down to a classic debate. Is it mindfulness or is it just good old-fashioned distraction?
First, let's just be super clear on what mindfulness actually is, in a scientific sense. It's the ability to be fully present, to be aware of your thoughts and feelings, but in a non-judgmental way. It isn't about stopping your thoughts, it's about observing them without getting carried away. And that's a huge difference. Mindfulness is about leaning in and engaging with how you feel. Distraction is about leaning out, finding something else to do to escape a stressful thought. Distraction can be great, but it's fundamentally a mindless activity, not a mindful one. You're trying not to think about things.
And based on all this evidence, this is what the researchers believe is really happening. Coloring probably isn't some deep mindfulness practice. It's much more likely a simple, pleasant, and effective form of distraction. It just gives your worried brain something else to focus on for a little while.
Okay, so after digging through the lab tests, the claims, and the psychology behind it, what's the final word on adult coloring books? Let's bring it all together.
Here's the bottom line. The science says that yes, coloring can give you a quick, short-term mood boost and make you feel less stressed. And hey, it definitely beats reading a textbook. But, and these are big buts, that feeling doesn't show up in your body's physical stress signals, and there's no proof that it leads to any long-term benefits. At the end of the day, it's probably just a really nice way to distract yourself, not a form of therapy.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Maybe the real value here isn't in the crayon or the intricate patterns at all. Maybe the magic is just in the simple, almost radical choice to put our phones down, to stop multitasking for 10 minutes, and to just do one single, simple thing. What do you think?